Trinidad and Tobago's Police Service Commission to face questions over its selection process for the country's two highest-ranked cops. Our top story in Caribbean Newsline for Friday, February 2nd from the CMC News Center in Bridgetown. I'm Ricardo Roberts. Good evening. Thanks for joining us. The Trinidad and Tobago Parliament on Friday agreed to the establishment of a special select committee to look into the issues surrounding the appointment of a police commissioner and a deputy. The decision came amid public disquiet over the process and procedures used by the police commission in nominating two senior police officers, Deodat Dulal Chan and Harold Phillip, for the top posts that have been vacant since 2012. Now, one of the issues surrounding Dulal Chan, who has been nominated to be police chief, is that he has been named in recent weeks in connection with incidents requiring disciplinary action under the Police Complaints Authority. Both Prime Minister Dr. Keith Rowley and Opposition Leader Kamala Persad-Bissessar gave support to the motion to set up a special committee to get all the relevant information regarding the nominations. Under the Constitution, the Police Service Commission, which is charged with the process for selecting the two top positions in the force, is answerable only to the President, who had earlier submitted the two names to Parliament for approval on Friday. But Rowley told legislators that the House needed some questions answered and the process could therefore not be concluded. It's hoped those answers will be obtained by the Special Select Committee, which will be mandated to obtain information, documentation, and or evidence relevant to or touching the concerning the method, process, criterion, and consideration utilized by the Police Service Commission in selection of the candidates. The committee has until March 31st to submit its report. The Belize government is heading back to the Caribbean Court of Justice, the CCJ, to get out of paying a multi-million-dollar international arbitration award. It has filed an application seeking to throw out the CCJ order obtained by Belize Bank Limited in November last year to enforce an arbitration award against the government dating back to 2013, totaling more than 36 million Belize dollars. Both sides are heading back to court in dueling applications in March. Prime Minister Dean Barrow says the government also filed another application calling for the bank's application to be dismissed. He says there is a want of jurisdiction on the part of the CCJ to enforce its own decisions. Last year, the Prime Minister said government legislators would have been afforded a conscience vote in Parliament for approving funds to satisfy the CCJ ruling. After a first reading of a supplementary bill was tabled in January, there were plans to hold a meeting of the House of Representatives on February 16th for debate. But those plans may be on hold because Barrow says government needs a legal take on whether to proceed with the vote or wait until after the applications are heard in court.
I'm not entirely sure because, as you may have known, the Ashcroft Alliance, the Belize Bank, they filed an application for an enforcement order. The hearing of that has now been fixed for March 14th. The government also filed two applications, one concerning the matter of post-judgment interest. It is our contention that as of the date of the CCJ decision in favor of the bank, interest ought to have stopped running at 17% and ought to instead have run at the statutory rate of 6%. So that's as well before the CCJ and is to be heard at the same time as the bank's application.
In 2007, the parties entered into an agreement to settle the sums owed under the guarantee. However, no prior parliamentary approval was obtained before that arrangement was made. In 2004, the Belize government guaranteed a loan from the BBL to a private company, Universal Health Services, after the original guarantor, the Development Finance Corporation, a statutory body, fell into financial difficulty.
The government is saying, in any event, how can the bank ask for an enforcement order and an order of mandamus against the Minister of Finance when it is quite clear that our constitutional arrangements, as well as the provisions of the Finance and Audit Act, prevent any kind of payment of a judgment debt that is not already provided for by way of the Annual Appropriations Act. Prevent payment except Parliament votes the money. We are taking advice from the lawyers representing us as to whether, in terms of the date having now been fixed for the hearing of all those applications, and in particular that last one, we still ought to proceed with the vote on the 16th of February.
A commission of inquiry has been established in Guyana to investigate a massacre that sent shockwaves across the country in June 2008. Retired Justice Donald Trotman was sworn in as the sole commissioner looking into the massacre of 8 miners in Lindo Creek. The commission's work began yesterday and is expected to last 3 months. Based on the outcome of the inquiry, recommendations will be made on the actions to be taken against those responsible for the killings. The Commission of Inquiry is the first in a series of inquiries into extrajudicial killings that occurred between 2002 and 2009 when President Bharat Jagdeo was in office. President David Granger says the families of the deceased miners need closure and answers are needed in other killings.
We feel that this particular one hurt families directly. These are 8 persons. These are people who are not involved or not even suspected of being involved in any form of terrorism or wrongdoing. This is really a massacre of the innocents.
The President feels the way the investigation was initially handled indicated that there was a high level of collusion by the government of the day, that is, the past PPPC administration.
So we feel that this will be a pivotal investigation which will unravel the criminal networks that were behind the killings during what is now called the Jagdeo era, during the Troubles. And when we see the report of this commission of inquiry, it will lead to other commissions, the death of a former minister. It is really beyond belief that a president of a country could have one of his cabinet ministers assassinated and not even hold an inquest, not even hold an inquiry. Why should, if he knows all this stuff now, if he has all of this information, why not investigate the death of a cabinet colleague?
The Lindo Creek COI, according to the President, is expected to unravel the entire tapestry of criminality that engulfed Guyana between 2000 and 2008.
A commissioner has been appointed, and he will call for evidence, and the recommendations he will make, I'm sure, will be based on the evidence he will receive. I was very heartened by the fact that the leader of the opposition claims to know something about this period, and I hope he comes forward to give evidence and let the people of Guyana know what he knows.
And that report from Handel Duncan of Capital News. Still in Guyana, a former minister under the People's Progressive Party, Civic, says the country has a good case going before the International Court of Justice on its border dispute with Venezuela, but the matter cannot be resolved if Venezuela doesn't agree to go. In a recent interview with Royden James of HGP Nightly News, Dr. Henry Jeffrey says he believes Venezuela's decision not to go to the ICJ is because it knows that Guyana's case is solid, and he says going alone would mean the court could only give Guyana an advisory opinion and not a resolution.
From my understanding, it wouldn't be a decision, a settlement of the dispute. It would give Guyana some leverage in its negotiations, and if Venezuela should act untowardly.
Dr. Jeffrey was at the time speaking during an interview at his home on Thursday. Venezuela preferred to have the good offices process continue because the ICJ does not have compulsory jurisdiction over Guyana nor Venezuela. Dr. Jeffrey reasoned that Guyana should now take steps to sign on to the compulsory jurisdiction of the ICJ.
I assume if it was a settlement, but what we are saying, if it was a settlement, yes, I mean, if it would have settled it, but by that I mean, if you had both parties that decided to go, and like Suriname, and the matter is settled, that would have been the best case. Both parties agree, we go, the matter is settled, and one or another.
Dr. Jeffrey noted that whatever Guyana's position on this issue, the country should pursue it peacefully.
If you have a quarrel, you and your neighbor, for instance, have a quarrel, and it's not, it's costly to you or costly to them or costly to both of you, you have to have somebody that's going to solve it. You got to call somebody, either you go to court or you have some sort of mediator who try to solve, negotiate or try to solve that dispute. So yeah, it would be. But would it be if one party says, I am not coming? I mean, if one party says, I'm going, and the other party said, I'm not coming, it wouldn't be the ideal situation, maybe because you're smaller. Small countries always need law. Like, I don't want to say it, but like poor people always need. If you're rich and strong, or you're strong, you beat the other man up, for instance, or you do something, But if you are poor, you got to get a law. And therefore, small countries, law is important to them. And going, even if Venezuela would not go, going gives you a moral sort of leverage.
The former minister said that the best way out for Guyana is to climb the stairs of the ICJ. Royden James.
A senior U.S. official and a former president to visit the region next week. That's coming up after the break. Stay with us. U.S. Secretary of State Rex Tillerson is set to visit Jamaica next week, and former Prime Minister P.J. Patterson is urging the Andrew Holness administration to push its own policy agenda during the discussions. We get more in this TVJ report.
The U.S. State Department, in announcing the visit to Jamaica and other countries in the hemisphere last week, said Secretary Tillerson would seek to promote security issues, economic prosperity, energy security, and democracy. But Mr. Patterson wants Jamaica to pursue its own national interests in those discussions.
We cannot win the war against crime and violence or the fight against illegal narcotics and money laundering unless those who manufacture the weapons of destruction prohibit and enforce the curbs for the export of guns and bullets to our shores. Secondly, at this time, when some deny the reality of climate change, we must leave no doubt that our efforts to achieve stated and desirable targets for prosperity will be severely impeded and derailed by the devastating effects of climate change and global warming.
And the former Prime Minister is still seething following Donald Trump's recent statement on Haiti and African states.
And we must make it clear that aberration of our brothers and sisters in Haiti and the African continent is offensive and repulsive. We renounce any form of rhetoric which is divisive or racist. We must be unapologetic in the assertion of respect for our dignity as human beings.
Mr. Patterson was giving the main address at the launch of a book by Dr. Richard Bernal, Jamaica's former ambassador to the United States, at the regional headquarters of the University of the West Indies. That book explores the influence of small states on superpowers, focusing particularly on Jamaica's relationship with the United States.
Meantime, former U.S. President Bill Clinton will also be in the region next week. He's scheduled to visit Dominica and the U.S. Virgin Islands, both of which were battered by Category 5 hurricanes last September. The Clinton Foundation will be launching an action network on post-disaster recovery, which will provide support to the U.S. Virgin Islands, Puerto Rico, Dominica, and Antigua and Barbuda by securing long-term investments to help the recovery efforts. The first meeting will be held on April 3rd at the University of Miami, with 300 to 400 representatives expected from businesses, government, and non-governmental organizations. St. Kitts and Nevis Prime Minister Dr. Timothy Harris says the Twin Island Federation has seen a third consecutive year of economic growth. Speaking at his monthly press conference, Harris said 2.6% growth was recorded in 2017.
Notwithstanding the economic disruption and setback occasioned by 2 Category 5 hurricanes, the growth was impacted positively by a 9% expansion in construction services. Agriculture, we are proud to report, although still too small a percentage of the economy, it clocked in 14.3% growth. And it was due in large measure to the better weather conditions, boosting crop yields up to September when the hurricane had struck us. We experienced increased production of meats, and there were greater fishing landings. Of course, this is in part had been due to the use of additional FADs, fishing aggregate devices, in the course of 2017.
Prime Minister Harris said growth in the tourism and financial sectors was marginal but positive. There was 1% growth in tourism and 1.3% growth in the financial sectors. Cuban state media is reporting that the 68-year-old son of Cuba's former leader Fidel Castro has committed suicide. Nuclear physicist Fidel Angel Castro Diaz-Balart was found dead Thursday morning. He's said to have suffered from depression and has been receiving medical treatment as an outpatient in recent months following a hospital stay. Now, at the time of his death, he was a scientific advisor for the Cuban Council of State, and he served as vice president of Cuba's Academy of Sciences.